So I built an MCP server on top of blockchain technology. And if you didn't know by now, I built wasmX, which is a blockchain engine that uses WASM WebAssembly contracts. And these contracts can even be protocol contracts. So they have deterministic storage and they behave like normal, I don't know, Solidity contracts for Ethereum, but they can also be building blocks of the blockchain itself, and they can have storage that is not deterministic, that is unique maybe for that particular node or validator. So that's how I was able to have all sorts of extensions for these WebAssembly contracts, even HTTP client methods, and HTTP servers. So this MCP server is built on top of HTTP building blocks from wasmX, and I also built a OAuth 2 authentication server that first I built it as a host module, and then I built it entirely in TinyGo WASM contracts. But the authentication part, I'll do a second video for that, because this particular custom GPT that I built is already published for ChatGPT, and I'll soon have it published for Claude and even for Gemini as an extension for the CLI. So this is with data that I have for my Fortuna project. So it's like thousands of VCs and accelerators and residencies and fellowships and so on. So I thought, let's make this data available and create vector embeddings for all of this information, and then expose these vector embeddings through an MCP server. So that's what this does. It takes the string query. So the user asks something like search for pre-seed VCs in biotech. You take that string query, it goes through the MCP server, through this smart contracts, WASM smart contracts in my blockchain, and then I have a Python script that gets triggered to compute the vector embeddings for that particular string. And with that, I do the search in my database, which is Postgre, with PG vector extensions. So I also have Postgre extensions for wasmX. And this is the backend of the custom GPT in ChatGPT. So what happens here, it gets this description from an API that I expose here. And I have only one path, search knowledge, right? So it takes this description, it shows you the methods available. I have only one, and then you can test it here. And this is made public already. If you search for VC match startups, you can see it here. And we can start a chat. Okay. Move this a little bit. Okay, it's talking with the backend. And the backend will just send an array of, okay, so ChatGPT also does a little bit of formatting. This is the actual response that I'm sending back, 10 results, with links if they exist to LinkedIn, X, emails, and so on. And maybe a link to where you can apply to the actual application form and the details that I have in the database. Okay. And I specifically told ChatGPT to format the links so they are clickable. Great. So how was this done? Okay. This is a script that I have that made it very easy to deploy a blockchain and set it up properly with this custom MCP search tool. So we deploy this MCP contract for search, specifically for search, and I have it in the precompiles of the chain. But we deploy it with the right details, with the right connection for the database and these private environment variables. And then we assign it a role. Usually, in a blockchain that has consensus, this role is voted by governance, because that's how wasmX treats these contracts that have an important core role. They are protected contracts. They can be set with a specific role by governance. That's how I have it here too. It's just that I put my governance to be like 2 minutes, and I just need to vote once. So when it gets registered with the MCP role, then the MCP registry contract automatically gets the description, the JSON configuration from this particular contract, and registers it so it can get included in that path that I showed you here. So this path is actually generated by the MCP registry. Okay. So we deploy, we instantiate the MCP search contract, and then we register the MCP role for this contract via a governance proposal, and we wait for that to happen. And then we also, well, this is the OAuth part that I'm not going over now. We just register the client with our OAuth server registry. And then we also start the HTTP server, because all of these routes from the authentication server, from the MCP registry, they are registered with the HTTP server contract. And that's the control center. And then the chain is ready and we can use it. So this is the how I start the chain. And now I'll show you a couple of things. So this is the MCP search contract. It's written in TinyGo, so it's Golang, but with an SDK that I have for wasmX. And it also has some scripts which are Python. These are the scripts, for example, generate embedding local. This is the script that generates the search query embeddings. And it is run with a command from the blockchain. Now, this is on a branch. It's not yet made as an official supported feature. So it's not in a stable release, because I'm not quite happy with how I do this. I should be able to have this Python script as a type of contract. I already have Python contracts, so contracts written in Python, because I have a Python interpreter in wasmX. But this is not it. These are actual scripts that you can run that don't need a wasmX SDK, so they don't need to be interpreted. So it can be another type of contract that is executed directly with the Python executable. But they should be instantiated in the blockchain as a separate contract, which I don't have it now. So that's one thing that needs to be done until this can be a production ready system, because you need to have the hash of this code to make sure that you are running something that you know about, that you know the script. this is how I tell what the wasmX engine, what APIs this contract needs. Okay, I had a couple of more paths that I didn't expose, but this is the search knowledge path that gets the configuration and then generates the query embedding by calling the script with Python 3. Okay, but we have the MCP registry. So this is where, when a contract gets a role, when the MCP search contract gets a role, itself it registers with the MCP registry. Because it has already a role, any contract with a role can self-register in the registry. That's the mechanism that I devised for this. And it calls the registry contract with it. It knows its own routes and configuration and descriptions and so on. Now, this MCP registry needs to call the HTTP server contract, which is here. So this is where it sets routes, it removes routes, and so on. And when it starts the server, it starts with all the routes that it has in its storage. And it uses this SDK, the wasmX environment SDK for the HTTP server, because this is its own module in the wasmX host. So I have all of these SDKs with env. This is the basic one with where I have some, storage, store variables, load variables, get call data. You will recognize these commands if you know how Ethereum or the Ethereum opcodes and so on. So it's kind of the basic building blocks for any blockchain. But then you have consensus, you have some core APIs that are internal and only contracts with roles have access to them. You have cross-chain, HTTP client, and so on. You have email protocols, EMAP and SMTP. You have P2P because the consensus protocols are implemented as contracts. So this is what they use. They use these SDKs for the P2P one actually uses libp2p under the hood. And access to any SQL database or Postgre. And this is the Postgre SDK is what I've used to communicate with our database for Fortuna. Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of it. And the OAuth 2 server, this I'll present this in another video. So a quick look at the backend. These are logs from the blockchain that we have now, and we can see our query that we just searched for pre-seed VCs and accelerators in biotech. Okay, so this is where generated embeddings and script execution completed, successfully generated embeddings, search results, and so on. So there you have it. This is part of the blockchain instantiation. And so on. These were the governance proposals for registering the MCP role. Yeah, that's it. So if you want to try wasmX, see what it can do, I'm working on a lot of new stuff. Some of them I cannot publish or include in a release right now because they are not production ready. But interesting things are coming. And because the blockchain is so flexible, you can do provable things in AI. You can have provable training. You can have these provable MCP registries. And I actually just wrote an article about where the long-term vision is with these types of tools. And you can actually see this article on my website at fortuna.provable.dev. You have a link to this VC match for startups too. And this is the goal. This is what we are building these tools for. Okay? So take a look and let's build a better society together.